The other reason I think people get into stress, which you write about, Nick, uh, which resonated a lot with me, is values, alignment, and stress. Right? Uh, that's a beautiful point because many people uh, really don't understand what their inner values are. They then go into an environment where the values are not aligned with their own, values that probably they really stand for, and that creates a kind of a what I call as a Brownian movement in your head or in your mind, right? So therefore, how important is values alignment and stress, and how do you really understand this as we get into, say, a new job or a new role? And some people actually say, you know what, that's not in line with my values, therefore I'm not going to take up that role, right? So therefore, that's a very deep understanding of yourself that you need. So how do I go through that process?
Yeah, good. This was a really surprising thing we learned when we did the interviews and the research was because the way burnout and stress is often talked about, it's just like to do with workload. Like people have got too much work, therefore they're burning out. But when we interviewed people who had burned out, we saw that actually often, sometimes it was workload, but often it wasn't. They weren't working that hard, but they had a bad fit with their role or their company. And we started to identify this thing around values alignment. When people were values misaligned, they would keep working hard, but they didn't care or see any purpose in the work they were doing. In fact, sometimes it was against their values. It was completely misaligned. And so they keep working hard, but they became angry often. Probably the best word is they became resentful of how much of themselves they were giving and they were getting nothing back in return. And people who stick like that for too long become at very high risk of burning out. Now, interestingly, people who have very high values alignment, so you see this sometimes in healthcare, or you might see it with founders, you see it with not for profits, but you also just see it in regular businesses. Really high values alignment, they were also at risk of burning out because they just loved what they were doing so much. You know, there were more patients to serve, there were more people to help, and they would just give so much of themselves, they would burn themselves out. So high or low values alignment was risky. And really, to your question of how do you find this stuff out, it takes deep reflection on experiences you've had. Like if you think about all the different places you've worked, which ones felt right and which ones didn't and why. And it takes generally just reflection on what do I care about, what matters to me, and what will I not tolerate. And that takes experience and reflection. And reflection is something which probably people don't do enough of. They tend to get on autopilot and can drift for a long time. That's my experience.
That's really true, Nick. Which what I've seen, which is really what I want to share, is the expectation that people have is, you know what, every year I need to get promoted, I need to get an increment, I need to move up the ladder. But what you're really saying is there are people who say that I'm an individual contributor. I like working on something deep. I don't really love to manage people. That doesn't really excite me. That means that I'm actually going to do this job, in this role, and I may not grow in the organization, but I may grow professionally, right? So this values alignment is really what you're talking about, right?
Yes, and yeah, and to your point there, you said a couple of important things. One was working out what you value, but then two was making decisions based on that, which might be I want to be an individual contributor, and we saw people do that, and it made them happier. One challenge, to make it real, is people feel like, well, I've got to earn an income. I've got to support my family. Maybe I don't like this job or it's not a good fit, but I have to earn money. So it needs to be realistic. What we found was risky. Sometimes we all get in situations like that, but it is how long do you stick in that situation? Or over time, do you just move in a direction for better fit for you is the important thing. Rather than think, okay, I've got to throw everything away tomorrow and quit my job. It's not that.